got 25 minutes. We got to go.
Hey. Happy Wednesday, guys.
Happy Wednesday. Super excited to see everyone in Say That Nation. However, if this is your first time with us, please put a 1 in the chat. We love to say hello to all of our newcomers. And if it is your first time, welcome to Say That channel, where we are unapologetic about talking about the ugly come up of entrepreneurship. So we've all heard those stories about people who start from nothing and then have massive success. But what happens in the middle? What happens during the ugly come up? Well, that's what we're here to talk about. What's the mindset you need to have, the pitfalls you need to circumvent, all those things, and so much more. So we've got 25 minutes to answer a topic question of the day. Thank you guys for sending us your topic questions. We love them. Keep them coming. And every once in a while, it's not just me and Winston. We have a guest. And so we love having our guests on with us. They've also got 25 minutes to answer the question. And when we run out of time, oh no, what do? We go into overtime. And so all of our Patreon members, you can go follow us on overtime and catch many of the overtimes that we have done with many of our guests. We have a whole library.
Yeah. All right. So let's jump into today's topic and bring out our guests.
Could your financial literacy be hurting your business? This is such a good question. We've talked about this a lot, but we are not the only ones who will be answering this question. I am super excited to bring on the guest that we have today. I think she is an excellent person to answer the question. Not only is she a major player in her area of the mortgage space, talk about financial literacy, you gotta know that when you're doing the mortgages. Not only that, does she own her own mortgage company, but she is a mom of many children, but what I love is that she's a mom of dogs. I love that. She's got Peanut Butter and Jelly, these 2 dogs, which is also the name of her company. And honestly, what I have to say, one of the best things I love about Jax is the way that she's so transparent and so down to earth. It really makes you understand what she's saying without it feeling like it's going over your head. So I'm really excited to bring to you all Jax Crider.
Welcome to the show.
There she is.
Hey guys, how are you?
Great. Thank you so much for joining us today. See, more dog lovers in the chat.
Oh yeah, always. If you hear dog noise in the background, I'm just gonna apologize. There's like 8,000 dogs over here. It's fine.
So for those who are not familiar with who you are and how you got into your line of business, tell us a little bit about how you got into mortgages.
So I kind of got into mortgage on accident. I was in college. I'm really good at math. I happened to be at my youth pastor's house doing like this leadership thing. And I'm like, man, I need a job. And his wife was in the mortgage space. She ran a mortgage broker and she's like, come work for me. And I said, cool, I'm good at math. Sure, I could do this. And I kind of liked that. I got to help people, but it was also like a way to be a little creative with numbers, right? Not just like your traditional standard stuff. Cause I was originally a mechanical engineering major and then I was business accounting, and neither one allowed quite the interaction with people and sort of flexibility in the numbers space. So I kind of ended up there on accident. And we have a joke in the mortgage world. Once you get in, it's like the mafia. You can't ever get out. You're just kind of stuck in this space. And it's sort of true, right? I mean, I don't know. And it's a lot of it has to do with the helping of people. A lot of it has to do with it's a really good, lucrative financial career. So there's that aspect too. But I truly enjoy helping people, right? So after being in for like 15 plus years, I went ahead and launched my own company. Actually, the month that the pandemic really took off, that's when we launched our company, March of 2020. It's fine. We're like trying to figure out how to do all this. The good news was we were still able to meet like physically in person because we were considered a essential business, if you will, in our space. So yeah, we started in 2020 and it was PBJ Mortgage. And the whole objective was to make mortgage simple, to simplify it down to making like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Basically, you come to us with your issues and your problems, and then we sort of tailor a few solutions to you that meet what you were looking for by still educating you and allowing you to make the call, right? So nobody has time to search all the financial junk because it's a lot. There's more information in the mortgage space than could fill up the whole room I'm sitting in, and it changes all the time. So little hard to be an expert in the mortgage space, truthfully. And so we just try to drill that down, right? And education is at the forefront. Educate, empathize, empower. They're our core values, and I try really hard to hold true to that.
I know we're going to jump into the question, but do you think what you've just shared, do you think that it's, and I know you guys, the goal is to simplify, but do you think it's complicated on purpose?
I don't necessarily think that it's, I mean, maybe there is some level of that. I just think that there's a lot of moving pieces in mortgage. And so it's like, if it was just one thing, but like there's all these different facets and they change constantly. And a lot of that has to do with the risk profile. So like people think that mortgage professionals, that we don't want to do loans for people. It's simply not true. What's happening is that the risk appetite is changing. So it's purely numbers and it's purely risk, right? So if somebody's appetite for risk is a little bit more, so they want to, take on a little bit riskier of a client, if you will, from a statistics perspective, then we are able to loan money to a slightly riskier client. And when people are afraid that that's not going to be a good move financially, you'll see the reins pull back. Well, that's really hard for the general public to keep on, on point. And oftentimes, unfortunately, the media, when they're talking about the mortgage space, they're doing it out of a very fear-mongering perspective, which is really not helpful, in my opinion. You know what I mean? Like, I always tell the customer, usually the answer is not no. It may be not now, but we can show you the path to get there. But people don't see things like that. They just hear the media saying it's a bad time to buy, or, if your credit's not perfect, you can't buy a house. If you don't have 20% down, well, all that's just not true. But of course, the general public, that's all that they're seeing. And they're not going to be able to take the time to look at guidelines and see, actually, I might need 0% down or 3% or 3.5%. You know what I mean? They're not. But that's a lot of information. So it's easier to try to find somebody who can simplify that down for them and say, okay, here's what you shared with me. Here's where you're at. Let me help you figure that
out. Okay. I'm ready.
Oh, well, I was going to say, that is a really great answer. And kind of like what I was saying in the intro, the way that you break things down, it makes things much easier to understand. And even that part of it, right? I'm not going to understand everything because it's just really complicated. So I will need some help to navigate it all. Well, Okay, so let's get into the question. Could your financial literacy be hurting your business?
So I will argue that financial literacy is probably one of the most important pieces of the puzzle, not just from a business aspect, but from an everything aspect. I mean, unfortunately, I think our education system is doing a really crappy job of showing anything about money. And it's the thing that touches your hands every single day, right? We're teaching you Pythagorean theorem and photosynthesis. And I'm not saying those are not important concepts. And depending on what you're going to do for a living, maybe there's something that'll be relevant for you for the future. But I promise you, money is going to touch your hand every day. And if you don't know how to utilize it in your personal life, you probably are not going to know how to utilize it in your business life either, right? And there's definite ways you can leverage money effectively. But if you don't understand how to do that, then, I mean, it's not necessarily going to make you unsuccessful at business. It just might make it a really longer stretch to get to where you want to be, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. So
don't you guys agree? What do you think?
No, definitely. I mean, we've spoken openly on this show about it. And obviously Janelle as an educator, we recognize there is obviously value in the school system, but maybe it just needs an overhaul in terms of some of the topics that they're discussing, because it's not practical in our everyday life beyond the actual schooling. And so people aren't able to apply much of what they're learning in school in a way that can actually help. To your point, maybe not even as a business owner, to your point about people who find themselves in debt, a lot of that stuff just comes from coming out of an institution that's put them in debt in some instances, and then not being educated on what to do once they're getting a job.
I say all the time, look, we're in America. This is a free market society, so you can do whatever you want. And I have no problem when a client comes to me and maybe they're in loads of debt. If they did it intentionally and they did it because that was going to better their life or their lifestyle or whatever it was that was important to them, I don't personally care, right? Like that was their decision. As long as they made it with like eyes wide open, they understood what that was going to look like for the future. So if you understood that by making this financial decision, this was potentially going to be the ripple, that's great. Like you make, you do you make your call. That's fine, right? My husband and I work in this financial space and have for many, many years. We don't make always the best financial decisions personally, but we make them intentionally, right? Like we intentionally make a choice knowing what the risk looks like and what the ripple could potentially be. That's really what needs to be educated is just, okay, you make this choice. This is the potential outcome, good or bad. Because every single decision you make in life has a consequence. It could be a good consequence or a bad consequence, but it's going to be a consequence nonetheless.
Now, but does that go beyond just someone understanding, hey, if I charge something on a card that I don't necessarily have the funds for right now, I may incur this level of interest? Or are you saying something even deeper than that they're not even aware of?
Well, I mean, I think it's, of course, on the surface, there's the numbers of just, hey, I can't afford this. But then remind yourself, it's a lot of times like a mentality. Like I say all the time, and I know I probably might get a little bit of flack for this, but the reality is you don't need a new one of these every single year. You just don't. Like, and people, especially if you don't make that much money, if you're making $10, $15, $20 an hour, I mean, you have to look at the cost benefit analysis of like what the phone cost is and how you're utilizing it. Now, if you're utilizing it for business, it might be a different situation, right? Maybe you do need a new one every single year, etc. But we've convinced ourselves mentally that like, no, I have to have this and whatever. So I'm not saying you don't do that. I'm just saying no, that if you do that, you're trading off that you might not be able to do this other thing, right?
No, that makes sense.
I mean, and it's like that in business too, right? We have to all make decisions in business. Like, so cool, I want to invest in this particular marketing thing, whatever that is, platform, advertisement, etc. And I have to outlay this amount of dollars, right? What's my return on investment going to look like? And if I do this, I can't do this, right? Or if I do both, I'm putting myself potentially in harm's way that my business won't be financially solvent and I'll either have to pull it from my personal funds. People make that mistake a lot, right? And then not only is their business failing, but their personal lives are failing too simultaneously.
That probably happens a lot, especially for the newest business owners out there, right? Like they're just trying to make it work. Well, it's interesting. So what Winston asked was similar to what I was thinking. So if you had to say like, what are like the top, let's say three, what are the top three things that people aren't the most literate about in terms of their finances that you feel like are quintessential to
that's a good one.
Either running their business or their personal finances?
So number one, people don't understand that credit is a game. It's completely manipulatable. Like people do not realize, like for instance, I'll give you an example. My credit score can range anywhere from 600 and 750. And you're saying to yourself, what the heck? That's a pretty big range. Well, a lot of it has to do with how I utilize credit cards and what period I'm in. So I don't want to pay like for instance, if I put something on a credit card, I want to wait until I actually am going to almost get charged the interest, like not get charged the interest, but almost get charged the interest, because then I'm sort of floating that money. Does that make sense? Like, so when my utilization is getting reported, it's getting reported super high on those credit cards, which will pull down my score. But I know if I have a major financial purchase I need to make, the second I pull those down and give it about 15 to 30 days, pop, my score is going to jump. Okay. But people don't know that that is a game. And it truly is, right? There's a lot of aspect within credit where we can manipulate it. In fact, I tell people all the time, please don't wait to talk to me. Okay. You want to look to buy a house. You want to do it a year from now. That's great. Let me take a look at it now, because there's things that I can tell you to do or not do. And people always think they know. They're like, oh, I know how to do that. Well, maybe you know how to do that. But wouldn't you like the reassurance of me just telling you like, okay, this makes the most sense, if you will. So people just don't realize that you can absolutely manipulate it. But you need to sort of pay attention. Like for instance, I see this mistake made a lot. People would take the longest reporting card they've had forever and ever, because it's likely very small. Because when they first got credit, they gave them like a $200 limit and they closed the account. Well, length of time of how long you've had something matters a lot to your credit profile. So I have a credit card that I've had since I was 19 or 20. It has a $200 limit, and I still have it, and I still utilize it. Do I utilize it much? No. Obviously, I can't really do much with $200, but I still use it. Why? Because it gives me the longevity of showing that I've had credit for a long time with an institution, and I will keep it forever for that reason. But most people just don't realize that. All they think is that, oh, I need this certain score. They also don't realize that there's over 200 different scoring models in credit. So what they get frustrated about is Credit Sesame and Credit Karma tell them one thing, or the little credit wizard you have on your credit cards. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Chase has one of those now, yeah.
Correct. Most major credit card players do, and you can opt into it and like see like what your credit's doing. They're all different kinds of scoring models. So then when they come to talk to an auto lender or a mortgage lender or something like that in that space, they don't realize that the score is going to look differently. And it has to do with the amount of weight people are putting on different things on your credit report. So obviously, if you're trying to get a mortgage, how you've paid your housing, specifically a mortgage, is going to weigh the most heavily with us. That's what we care about the most, right? Because it's probably a pretty good indicator of how you're going to pay me.
Off your bills, yeah.
Right? Exactly. Whereas we might not care as much about some of the other things. And so I see that happen a lot. People don't understand that not only is the score manipulatable, but it's different depending on the platform. Because in their mind, it's like credit score. It's got to be like one score.
Set number. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's like probably the biggest one. And then just like how to use money to your advantage, right? People have some really old school ways of thinking about money. They think debt's a bad thing. I think it depends on your mindset. I think debt can be good if you use it correctly, but you have to make sure that you've given yourself some insulation with taking on additional debt.
Well, it's kind of like what you said. It's so like recognizing or even not understanding, and this is certainly a knowledge thing, that you can utilize that, you can leverage that. What you mentioned about the credit card was so interesting. When we used to do, so I used to do, be a real estate broker and take care of a lot of the application process. And to your point, when we had a prospective client that their issue was about not paying rent or had any, they had been to court for anything having to do with that, that was weighed heavier than if they had missed a couple credit card payments or something to that effect. Because in our mind, or the way the landlord, I guess, would consider that is they care more about their rent. So they care that they pay their rent more so than they worry about paying or being late on a credit card, which is maybe $15, $30, and so on. Whereas your rent being late is a significantly larger amount of money. So I completely agree and I have experience with that.
Yeah, people just don't really think about it. I mean, in an ideal world, of course, like you've got plenty of money in the bank and you keep all your credit card amounts low and whatever, but let's be real. That's just not real life, right? You have periods of time where you're more heavy debt leveraged, and then you got periods of time where you're able to weigh that out. So, I mean, people just don't understand that like debt's not necessarily bad, but you do have to be careful with it, and you do have to ensure that you're not drowning in it. And also, the creditors, like they want you to keep spending money because they don't think about it. If you're floating the money and you're paying it off in full every single month, they're not making any money off of you. They, in essence, will make the transaction fee of like whatever it is you charge. But like beyond that, they're not making any additional funds off of you, right? In fact, credit card companies, banks in general, they love when you pay things late or like let your account get low because it means they get to kick you with another $15 or $20 fee. And it's those small things that eat you alive.
Yeah.
Because when you add them together, you're like, holy cow. I mean, and think about it. That's why we've gone so much to subscription models in general, right? Because you think to yourself, oh, $5 is not that big of a deal. And it isn't that big of a deal, right? Until you multiply it by $20 or $35 things.
Platforms that you remember to,
And then you're like, oh, wait, that's a car payment.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, it's just the truth. And that's where you have to go intentional. Because I'm not saying like there are things that we all find more valuable. Like I find more valuable something, and then my husband might find something else more valuable. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But like write down the priority list of like what is important to you. And then sort of weigh out. Like, okay, this is where I can cut, down. This is where I can go skinny. And I mean, I tell my girls all the time. So I have 3 adult stepdaughters, and I tell them all the time, I don't care where you end up, as long as you get there intentionally. Right? Just be intentional with the choices you're making.
Say that.
You said that originally too. Like, it's better to at least make decisions financially with intention and know why you're making the decisions than to just kind of like randomly end up somewhere. I thought that was really interesting because even that mindset, I feel like maybe because people feel like they just don't know. They're like, I just don't understand it, and so they just kind of like let things happen, as opposed to like, I recognize I'm trying to make the best decision that I can right now with what I have. And it's okay if it turns out in the long run it's not the best decision I've made, but at least it was the best I could do in the moment, and I was intentional about it. And I feel like that to me feels much more empowering than to just kind of
then you think you're messing up.
Yeah.
Well, but here's the reality. I mean, nobody is perfect because hindsight's always 20/20, and that's why we have that saying, right? It's because when you look back, you're like, man, I wish I would have done that a little differently. And of course, you would do it differently if you had to go back and do it again. But as long as you're moving forward and you're learning from it, that's really all that needs to happen, right? So like, you made a misstep, cool, you made a misstep. Why did you make the misstep? How do you avoid the misstep the next time around? You know what I mean? It's the same thing with the mortgage side too. I mean, I tell people that all the time. Like, not everything is going to go perfectly. Like, that's okay, right? Like, we're going to keep putting one foot in front of the other, and that's all that you can do. Like, make the best financial decisions you can, make them intentionally, try to make them with good information, right? Try to make sure you're getting in front of professionals or people who are going to like be invested in where you're going to end up. And then from there, it's not going to go perfectly. You know what I mean? Like, we ask the customers all the time, how long do you think you're going to be in this home? Right? Because we're helping them make financial decisions based on what their answers are. Well, guess what? Life changes. Oh, you got this major promotion and now you have to move halfway across the country. So you weren't there as long. Okay, well, that's fine. I mean, sometimes you're going to pay money that, if you could have a crystal ball, look in the future, you wouldn't have paid, but kind of is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But people beat themselves up about that too. And that's another problem, is then they get tunnel vision. I can't make this mistake ever again. And it's like, yeah, but as long as you didn't do it on purpose,
right?
Don't beat yourself up. It is what it is.
And some of these are the fears that spill over, especially people who are looking to transition into becoming business owners. You know, so to that point, I wanted to hear, and I know you shared a little bit about, you said you were working for was it pastor's wife's friend or something, right?
She ran a mortgage company.
Okay, great. So then what was the deciding thing for you and your husband to move into your own space and start your own thing?
So it definitely wasn't an easy decision. I mean, I've worked for pretty much most of the major players in the game. So like, we're talking banks and credit unions and large mortgage lenders and everybody in between. I just got a lot tired of the control factor. So like, there's only about so much I could kind of control in this space. And for me, I'm always going to try to do right. And unfortunately, in my space, there's a lot of greed. It's why there's a lot of distrust in my industry, right? Because they just see us as like the used car salesman of the world, if you will, for this large financial transaction.
The housing world,
I mean, a lot of people, I say it all the time, because here's the reality. For being in the real estate space, I'm not the fun part of the transaction. Okay. I'm the boring part. And I say that all the time. You don't wake up in the morning and say to yourself, you know what I want to do today? I want to borrow $500,000. Like, nobody says that. You do wake up and say, I want to buy a house. You look at your bank account and you say, man, I don't have $500,000 in my bank account. And then I become a necessary evil of the transaction. But people are super fearful in our space of talking to us because they think that I'm going to tell them that their credit sucks and that they suck. And whatever missteps they made along the way, that like they're going to have to air that dirty laundry with me, and then that's going to make them vulnerable. But the truth of the matter is, when you find professionals that actually care, that's not the case, right? Like, it doesn't matter to me. I don't care if your FICO score was 400 at one point, now it's 800, or vice versa. Like, it doesn't matter to me, right? I mean, it's ultimately about, where are you trying to get? And what do you want to be able to do? And unfortunately, a lot of the corporations, there's a lot of corporate greed there. And then there's also a lot more limiting on like the information you can share, because they're afraid, oh, if we say this, the CFPB is going to come after us, or if we do this way. And so there's so much red tape that I was like, yeah, no. What I didn't tell you is I have a law degree, and I get asked all the time, why aren't you a lawyer? And it was great education, and I loved it. And it's definitely nothing against lawyers. I just felt like I could use my information. So I guess being that I have that background, I kind of know how close I can get to the line before I'm like step over it.
Okay.
Right. So I can kind of monitor myself, if you will. And I never wanted to be some giant, big, huge company. I just wanted to be able to help people on a very intimate level, because it is a very stressful, big transaction.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, I love that. I love hearing about why you decided to go off on your own. In going off on your own, what are some of the lessons that you've learned about doing this on your own instead of doing it, underneath the, with a large company to back you?
So the thing that I think is super important as an entrepreneur in general that you have to realize is man, it's hard, because especially in our world that's so full of technology, there's lots of there is lots of really cool things that you can do, but like, how do you narrow that down and how do you figure it out? And it's all on you. Like, nobody's providing it to you. You have to buy it on your own, and it can be a lot, and it can be really like daunting, right? And I've learned how to use my resources a lot better. There's a book, and I was talking about it earlier, Who Not How, and it's all about like,
I was gonna say, hold on, leave that for overtime.
Okay. I was going to say, yeah. So we'll talk a little bit more in overtime, guys, about that whole situation, because the truth of the matter is, when entrepreneurship, it's just really difficult. Like, there's so many pieces and you're all the bosses, right? Like, there is no IT department. It's you. Congrats. And there is no accounting department. It's you. Congrats. Unless you want to hire somebody, and you may or may not have the money to do that. At the beginning, you don't have the money to do any of that.
Right.
So it's you.
That's literally where I want to go. Okay, so I know we're going to overtime. So quickly, here's where we can find you. What are you going to start with? Your website. And I know you're on Facebook, so we have Crider.
And please feel free to reach out to Jack. She's a real person. She will respond to your messages and your DMs.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Professional ones only, though. Okay.
Awesome. And guys, please go ahead and put in the comments if you have found what we've been talking about today valuable. Please let us know. We want to hear that. Jeannie already told us. Thank you, Jax. Value added. Awesome. This has been amazing. We definitely have to have you back for sure, because the conversation's not over. But everybody else, come and join us in overtime as Jax continues to answer the question and we get in a little bit deeper about some other things.
Yeah, I would definitely want to get into the technical side of it. So guys, find us over in the Patreon side of this. Click the link in the description. And until we see you guys next week, as always, remember, you deserve the good life.
Say that.
We'll see you guys.